get started. Welcome everyone to Participate Learning's Classroom Blueprint series. My name is Kevin Smith and I'm your host today. And I am the Director of Partnerships here at Participate Learning. Along with me today on the technical side of things, we have the extraordinaire Sarah Dittman, who has just shown up on screen. Thank you, Sarah. Sarah has been instrumental in getting us set up and ready and has been playing that wonderful, relaxing background music that everyone enjoyed a bit before we got started. So thanks again, Sarah, for helping us out. We are Participate Learning, and we believe in uniting our world through global education. And we do so by partnering with schools to advance global education in two areas specifically that we're going to touch on today. One is through the development of global leaders through our Global Leaders program, beginning at the elementary level, and also through dual language programming, K-8, and that is the focus of our conversation today. So we want to begin with a discussion today, a broad discussion on the leadership behind the support of our dual language programs, with a special focus on the response to the pandemic and the different modalities of instruction that many districts have had to deal with over the last few months. We at Participate Learning partner currently with over 90 dual language programs and host close to 500 dual language teachers. And so it is not a small task to think about how to respond to a crisis like this that impacts every area of teaching and learning. To begin our conversation, we are going to introduce two of our collaborators and colleagues. First to introduce, I want to introduce Dr. Jake Henry. Dr. Henry comes to us with a very successful career in public education and education in general. He has been a foreign language educator, as well as the principal of a dual language program in Guilford County, and an executive director for technology and innovation, as well as chief operations and chief academic officer in Orange County, North Carolina. Welcome, Jake. Did I leave anything out?
Thank you, Kevin. That's everything.
Alongside Jake Henry, we have Muriel Hutchins, who I've known actually from a different place and time way back when. We won't say how many years ago we first met Muriel, but the thing that you need to know about Muriel is that she is one of the best dual language educators and leaders out there. And she smiles because she is very modest when about her accolades that we share today, but it is definitely true. She is currently the Associate Director of Programs and works alongside Jake to help advance the access to the quality and the support of dual language programs here at Participate Learning. So thanks to both of you for being part of this discussion this morning. All right, we're gonna start with you, Jake. So let's go back in time a little bit to about February or March, when we started getting word about the pandemic and how it was going to impact schools. Schools started to announce that they were shutting down and that they were transitioning to remote learning. So what were the first concerns you had as you thought about moving away from in-person, going to remote, and what success was going to look like for teachers and for in dual language programs, teachers and principals in dual language programs?
Well, whenever there's a crisis or any type of challenging event or major change, people feel out of control. And that obviously increases their anxiety. And there was a lot of unknowns with what we were facing. So there was definitely a lot of anxiety. So the first step when you're facing situations like that as leaders is to create conditions so that people can return to normal or as close to normal as possible, as quickly as possible, even if that's a new normal that they're going to return to. So that means people need structures to follow, they need routines, and so we needed a process that we needed to implement to help create those conditions. And the first thing we did is, we were just transparent about the challenges that we were facing, both with our partners, with ourselves, within the organization, with the schools that we work with. We knew that we were going to be facing some constraints, and we knew that some of those constraints weren't going to be able to be overcome. But we had to be real clear about what those constraints were. So transparency was key throughout the process. The first step beyond transparency is to address the immediate pain points. So we needed a solution short term that would enable our partners to be able to step back and take a breath and figure out what the solution was going to look like within their community. And so when we closed schools in March in North Carolina, we provided immediately paper and pencil packets to our partners so they would have something to do for the first 2 weeks while they figured out what the new instruction was going to look like. That reduced anxiety and gave people a chance to be able to figure out what new instruction should be. Once you address the immediate pain point, then you start building structures for what a long-term solution should look like. And so that's what we started doing next. We started looking at what routines and processes ought to be for what this new normal was going to look like, which was, virtual learning, at least for the foreseeable future. And that included helping teachers, helping schools and districts see what they can control and what they don't have any control over, and to focus on those things that they could control, so that they wouldn't be so focused on the things that were outside of their control. When people see that there's a plan and there's a way forward, even if it's not a great way forward, it's a challenging way forward, they're in a better place to focus on solutions rather than getting stuck on the problems that they're facing.
Right.
And once some of those structures were put in place, we started to train teachers on how to implement the new routines and procedures, because whenever there's change, that increases anxiety. Providing the training builds confidence for teachers and their ability to handle the situation. So that's a necessary step. And then you implement what the plan is, and you adapt quickly to what you learn about the new normal. That includes spotlighting where things are going well, coaching and problem solving with our partners where things are not going well, and providing space for teachers to learn from each other throughout this process, and really from administrators to learn from the process as well, because this was new for all of us. And then, of course, you continuously monitor and adapt to the changing conditions. And we've been doing that since March. Districts have been doing that. Schools have been doing that. Families have been doing that. The conditions continue to change, and they're going to continue to change over the next several months. And so this process is never complete. So in last spring, it meant flexible models that we built for districts as they were approaching different ways to do virtual learning. Some of them wanted a lot of live instruction, synchronous live instruction. Other partners had a lot of families without access to technology, so they were relying on paper and pencil methods, and some were a combination of the two. When school reopened this fall, the same process was applied, but this time we had to have flexible models depending on the reopening plan of our partners. Some were opening schools in a hybrid approach, with students coming to school some days and staying home other days. Some were completely virtual. And we also had to plan for districts who eventually, and have already started, coming back with all of their students, more of a normal situation. What we tried to emphasize in building all these structures and routines that we'll talk a little bit more about later was just helping folks to focus on the limited time they had with students to maximize the gains that they had with that short amount of time, and to really focus on reducing teacher anxiety. We felt like if we could give teachers a big picture vision of what it is we can accomplish and what it is we really can't accomplish due to our constraints, that would give them a little more confidence and reduce their anxiety, because if their anxiety is low, they have a better chance of engaging with their students and meeting them where they're at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you hit on several important elements there, Jake. You talked about the processes. What the crisis did was to shift the the service model that schools had in place, and you had to really pivot quickly and find solutions for that. And in your response, I hear you talk about focusing on the what and also focusing on people. Schools are always thinking about instructional quality, and it doesn't matter what crisis comes about.
Mhm.
There needs to be preservation of instructional quality to ensure that students are going to continue to learn. So, what elements were critical for you to focus on as you thought about how to respond to this crisis that would support teachers and students and ensure that that learning would continue?
We try to take an approach when talking to our teachers and our partners that we wanted to apply as much common sense as possible. This was not a time to try to be extraordinary. This was a time to think about what occurs in a normal classroom and figure out how do we best replicate that in this virtual or hybrid situation. If we try to do too much in response to a major challenge, then we're probably going overboard. So how do we just use common sense and try to replicate what it is we would do in a normal classroom in these changing conditions? And we also knew that we were going to have limited time with students relative to a normal situation. And so we tried to help them identify how to maximize the amount of time that they had with kids so that they could get the most gains possible. And it had to be flexible enough because all of our partners had different guidelines for how they were going to implement virtual or hybrid learning. Mudiel will talk about this in more detail, but that meant for us providing like percentages of how you ought to use your time. A certain percentage of time for setting the tone each day with an opening meeting with your kids. We recommended 40 to 45% of the time that they had to focus on literacy, 30 to 35% to focus on math, and the remainder of their time for other content areas, knowing that content areas could be integrated into literacy. And then we help them identify the tools that would be most useful for them to make learning happen within their communities.
And you did touch on something that I think we need to highlight, which is we serve a group of over 90 dual language programs, and the models that you're talking about are models that needed that flexibility because everyone was working a little bit, on a different format of instruction when it came to at-home learning or hybrid learning. So knowing that one size did not fit all, and still does not fit all, is an important point to emphasize as we continue our discussion. So learning expectations are also go hand in hand with that instructional quality and those core elements of instruction that need to be preserved. How did your team manage adjusting learning expectations as you think about the content and what was being taught every day?
Yeah, it's transparency again and acknowledging what it is we know to be true about the conditions we're facing. And we all know that learning is not going to occur at the same rate under the current conditions as it would in a normal setting. And we wanted to be clear with that. We think by being transparent with that reduces, again, anxiety for parents, schools. We just all need to be on the same page. When it comes to language acquisition, a big part of dual language and immersion programs is being immersed in the language and not just exposed to it, but engaging with it on a regular basis daily. And that level of engagement just wasn't going to be the same in a hybrid or virtual model. But we wanted to be clear with our families that it was still important to remain in dual language programs because of the long-term gain that students get from being in programs like these. And we felt confident that even though students wouldn't be learning at the same rate as normal, over time, long-term, when things do return back to normal, students are going to be able to make up for the time that we've lost. So we were real clear about the importance of maybe we won't be able to see students immersed to the same level as they are in normal situations, but continuing to be exposed to the language as much as possible by whatever means we could possibly do that, considering the models that were being implemented. We wanted our kids to continue to be exposed to the language, to be set up for when we could immerse them in deeper language learning experiences later, whether that be virtually or in person. Especially depending on the grade level and the amount of foundation of language that students had, it might look different in kindergarten and first grade relative to what a typical dual language situation would look like in a classroom. second through fifth grade, we felt like students we could use more of the target language with them because they had a deeper foundation. The other thing that we have to consider is that, dual language is such an effective strategy for students that are first, if they speak Spanish as their first language, for example. It's such an effective strategy for building literacy and content in their first language. We wanted to make clear that we needed to continue to use the target language because students benefit so much from having that exposure. It was balancing the needs of those who were first English speakers and first Spanish speakers, knowing that exposure to both languages is really important during this time, and we need to maximize as much as possible over time to immerse kids in the language.
I agree with you, and I think offline we did discuss a little bit about the impact of the EL population that participate in dual language programs, and the dangers of not engaging them in dual language. I don't think we have a choice as educators, as dual language professionals. We have to make sure that they're not being left out from the whole equation, that whatever we plan for in terms of school logistics and our hybrid models, that we have ELs also at the center of our discussions to make sure that they don't continue to fall behind. It is all of our responsibility to ensure that that continues to happen. So thanks for also thinking about them and including them in your plan. So I want to pivot a little bit and talk now about that other constituency that we serve, more directly now than before, and that is parents and families. So communicating with parents, one thing is to help our partner schools understand how we're going to support them in transitioning to whichever mode of instruction they're engaging students in. A different thing is to help parents understand that. So tell us about the ways in which your team address parents' questions about children learning and children learning in a dual language setting.
Yeah, at-home learning or hybrid learning is intimidating for any parent, let alone when you add in the complication of a second language. I think this is just a good leadership principle, whether you're a district level leader or you're a partner working with the school district. You want to equip the people that you work with to be able to communicate with the community and with families. In this instance, every community is different and has different needs and how they communicate with their families. But we wanted to put together talking points to help principals, to help teachers communicate with parents, one, about the benefits of being involved to remain in a dual language program, but also ways that they could help support the parent at home while their student was learning at home or in a hybrid setting. And so since we know that, just as any district leader would do, they would adapt the tools that they want to give to the folks in their district to the needs of the community. We wanted to provide tools that all of our partner districts could implement and tweak based upon their needs. That included the talking points for either memos or parent meetings. We recommended doing virtual meetings with parents before the launch of school, and then having continued virtual meetings with them as the point of the meeting before the launch of school is to try to set expectations for what it will be like. The ongoing meetings is so that as you're learning the struggles that parents are having, you can adapt your strategies as a school leader or as a teacher to better equip the parents to understand what's going on. Videos describing what this new normal would look like and learning expectations and outcomes and how they might be a little bit different compared to when kids were in person. And in those instances where parents needed a little extra TLC, one-on-one meetings, helping parents understand the benefit of remaining in the program and to stick with some short-term discomfort for the long-term gain that their students will have from being in a dual language program.
Right, that last phrase that you used is quite important. Understand the long-term gains and the benefits of that is critical to communicate, because when parents get nervous, they retract and they want to go back to basics, to what's familiar. And that's not always in the best interest of dual language students. Remote learning, to be honest with you, has been happening ever since the internet has been around. The big difference now is that everyone had to pivot quickly to this format with little or no time and little or no preparation. So helping parents understand what's at stake and what the long term gains are, I think is an important action that you guys took as well. All right, so let me talk to Muriel for a little bit. And now that we understand the vision and the process that Jake crafted as a response to the pandemic and multimodal learning, Muriel, it was your task to unpack this for teachers and for your program managers to impact those teachers and the schools. So, in your role, help us a little bit understand how you help teachers find formulas for success as they were planning for instruction.
Good morning. So when we were designing our framework, we envisioned 4 components to our process so that our teachers could organize their thoughts, plan, anticipate, and follow district guidelines. At the same time, they felt successful. So what we wanted teachers to consider were the areas of planning, technology, health and safety, and communication. So as Jake mentioned earlier, under the area of planning, we allocated specific times for literacy, math, and other areas. And depending on whether they were hybrid or all virtual, we gave them guidelines on how to maximize that live instruction they had with their students and to reserve everything else for times when students were not with the teacher. We provided them with sample lessons as well as printable and digital resources. And we also created a checklist for them to organize themselves under their specific plan. Our recommendation was to plan activities that required interaction. And of course, our suggestion for the first few weeks was to focus on the social emotional learning, as well as learning the management system and not necessarily on the curriculum and content just yet. Regarding technology, what we did was we provided access to tech tool tutorials, about 20 of them, that we thought could enhance teaching virtually or in a hybrid setting. And we encourage our teachers to choose just a few of those tools and always think about which ones were the most suitable for their plan. We also provided guidance with anchor charts, on rules and for virtual meetings, and we created those in both languages, in Spanish and in Mandarin. For the health and safety part, in addition to following the district's guidelines on sanitation protocols, we also provided anchor charts on sanitation rules, such as wearing your mask, washing your hands, keeping social distance, and so on. And finally, under communication, we recommended some ideas to start building relationships and setting the tone with families right from the start. We encouraged them to call their families, to send out letters, to invite them to a live conference, if at all possible, or to send pre-recorded videos to each of them so they could explain some of the specific instructions and set clear expectations since the beginning. So I think that's basically the process we use to help our teachers to find those formulas for success.
So, Muriel, what I hear you saying is, as that vision was crafted for the general response and how you guys wanted to address things, then you went ahead and created the tools, the training, and the resources, made those available first to your program managers, because they then had to take them out to schools and work with teachers and provide that training and those resources, made all of those things available to them. So that was definitely, if I had been a teacher in this situation, if I were a teacher in this situation, I would definitely find all of those things very helpful, and not have to, sit by myself, scratch my head and think, okay, where do I go from here? I think a planned response like you guys have just described is very helpful to each of our partner schools and anyone who had access to those resources as well. So now, tell us a little bit about the program managers and how they help teachers know that they were addressing the most important aspects for their hybrid situation or for their teaching situation, whichever format that was.
So in order for our teachers to know that we're hitting those important aspects of planning, we also created schedules for both in-person and at-home learning. So during the in-person schedule, we suggested them, as you can see on the screen, to divide the day into percentages to ensure that we included listening, speaking, and conversational practice. So the first block was the opening of the day, and that included the morning meeting, social emotional learning, building community, and of course, setting the tone and expectation for the day. And they went over the health and safety procedures and routines as well. During the language and literacy development, we divided this section into two. We had the modeling part, which involved the whole group, mini lessons, read alouds, writing mini lessons, vocabulary instruction, and so on. So during this section, this section gave teachers the opportunity to model before moving on to the student practice. For the student practice piece, we focused on activities that require students to interact either with the teacher or the peers, of course, in the target language, since we knew that most likely they weren't going to get this opportunity at home. So the emphasis was placed on guided reading, word work, and interpersonal activities. During the math block, again, we included the modeling section as well as the student practice. And as you can see, the modeling section involved whole group mini lessons, while the student practice focused on activities that require students to interact with the teacher and peers through small groups and collaborative activities. And finally, we have a percentage of time dedicated to extension activities. And we suggested our teachers create opportunities during this period to connect individually with students to ensure they were prepared to work independently at home. So moving on to the at-home piece, and in order to make the most out of the time when students were at home, what we did was to suggest the focus to be on independent activities and language skills that students could work on without teacher or peer help. So for example, we have the language and literacy development piece, and we wanted the emphasis to be placed on independent reading and writing. For this piece, we suggested the modeling to occur through pre-recorded videos or any other tech tools that were available. And for the student practice, the focus was on independent work. And this could happen via online apps, games, or any other teacher-created assignments. During the math piece, again, we recommended modeling to occur through the pre-recorded videos, and the student practice piece to include activities, online activities via apps or games. And again, we always suggest that teacher create some of those assignments. And finally, the extension part, we wanted to create, or teachers to create opportunities for students to apply their learning during this piece and conduct research through activities such as project-based learning, scavenger hunts, challenges, role plays, or even show and tells with their family. Of course, all of these activities were in order to promote that language practice.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So again, while you're providing some guidelines, you're also giving teachers and schools the flexibility to adapt their teaching to whatever particular situation they are presented with in service of their students and their community. So, again, it's not one size fit all. We tend to think about, let's find one formula and let's have everyone do it the same way. When you're working with over 90 dual language programs, that's an impossibility. You have to build some flexibility in, and I think you guys did that really well. So, all right, so you've described to us the general formats, suggestions, models that you again suggested your schools could follow and adapt. So what have you learned about teachers through the last, 4 to 5 months since we've been involved in this crisis? What have you learned about the teachers that is a positive reflection on their response to the crisis?
Well, we'll definitely learn that our teachers are strong and they are able to cope with any situation that is thrown at them. But what's really funny is that, well, they're working really hard and they're doing an outstanding job, but they don't feel confident. I'm sorry, they don't feel confident and they don't recognize how well they're doing. Mainly because I've never been in a situation like this before, and everything feels so still new and challenging. So what we found is that they need to be encouraged. They need to hear how great they're doing because it makes them feel more confident. And of course, the more confident they are, the more effective that they'll be. So that positive reinforcement is what they need to hear constantly.
Yeah, I think that is such an important point that you make, Muriel, because we see examples of teachers doing great things, even on Twitter. They're sharing, some of those teachers share their lessons and share student
Right.
work and whatnot, but not every teacher is on social media. And
Mm-hmm.
those teachers that are not as visible are also doing a great job in the classroom and taking time to acknowledge their effort and their successes with students, and also helping them go through that reflective process of, this is what I did and it worked, but I think I can do better next time, is also an important part of helping them manage the anxiety of dealing with teaching through the pandemic. I think that is critical. Now, for both of you, this is an open question for both of you. When you look across all the programs and the 400 plus teachers and the number of principals that you work with and support, what are the successes that you can point to? And I also want to ask you about the challenges that you see ahead, because yes, you've had a good run so far in adjusting to the crisis up until now, but we still have some challenges ahead. So, what are some of those successes, and what are some of the challenges you see?
Well, from successes, definitely districts that have involved teachers in planning for what this looks like, from scheduling to what to teach when to who teaches which students. We found that teacher involvement's been a really important success indicator.
I think, like Jake said earlier, those schools that acknowledge the facts, that acknowledge what's happening, and that are transparent about learning expectations and outcomes regarding language acquisition.
Yeah, and I think too, the communication with parents, not just the upfront communication, but the ongoing. It's an extra step, and it's hard work. But districts that are making the effort and teachers to involve parents along the way and adapt to the needs of the parents has been a success indicator as well.
Along the lines of communication, and just like Kevin mentioned a few minutes ago, a big success has been teachers sharing what's working and what's not. Everything from lesson plans to resources, tech tools, ideas, just getting together and sharing those things that are working.
Yeah, and just try not to overcomplicate things. We found that the more complicated that, or the more that people try to do, the less they're able to really effectively reach their students. So just trying to keep it simple to meet the needs of the students has been a huge success. In terms of challenges, we're going to have to continue facing or being flexible, moving between models. Over the next several months, schools will go back and schools will shut down for a short period of time. And so that's going to be a challenge, just to manage those openings and closings. When we get back to normal, obviously, we're going to have to address what was lost during this time and figure out the best way forward to help students make up for the ground that may have been lost. But I think this was an important point that somebody made, a superintendent made to me yesterday. And he said COVID fatigue is real. It's a real thing. And he started describing what that looks like. And he said, teachers feel underappreciated right now. They're working so hard. And there's so much they're doing that we're not even seeing and noticing to meet the needs of their students. And they're getting tired and burned out. And on the flip side, you have parents who are feeling underappreciated as well, because they feel like we as school officials don't quite understand the challenges and struggles that they're going through and how difficult this is for them to manage at home. And then you have the leaders in the buildings who are doing everything they can to keep everybody happy and to keep morale up among their staff, their students, and their families. And they're tired. They're just tired. So just acknowledging that and knowing the stress that everyone's under and how to manage that, because there's not a short-term end in sight. Like, we're going to have to live with that tension for a while until we go back to normal. Acknowledging it, being aware of it, and doing whatever we can to encourage and support each other, I think is going to be a challenge.
Yes, I agree with you. I think that having advocates of schools and of teachers and of principals is an important element nowadays. And everyone is stressed. Parents, like you said, parents are stressed, and everyone in school is stressed as well. And just knowing that there is a network and a group of people that you can count on to answer the simplest questions sometimes, and also the more complex ones, is definitely a good thing to have. And as we wrap up our short discussion today, and I look at this model that we work with at Participate Learning, I can see that you, through the work that you've done, you've supported organizations and you've supported educators in each of these 4 areas. And so it's quite comprehensive, the work that you've done. I'm glad I'm associated with you guys and see the value in the work and the effort and the immense number of hours that you guys and your team, you've put into making sure that schools feel supported in such a critical endeavor, which is, maintaining and promoting dual language programs and global ed in general. So thank you very much for what you do. Thanks. We know that you have a lot on your plate. Thanks for taking out this time to chat with me this morning. And as part of our classroom blueprints, we hope to have an opportunity to continue to explore dual language topics and help the broader community understand how to best support their own programs. So we also want to thank our audience for spending a little bit of time this morning with us in our series. Please give us your feedback and tell us if you'd like a copy of some of the resources that both Muriel and Jake have mentioned this morning. And if you want to learn more about how we partner with schools, visit our website at participatelearning.com. And if you want to reach out directly to us, send us an email at partnerships@participatelearning.com. And I think we're done for today. Thanks again, and we look forward to our next discussion. Thank you, Jake. Thank you, Muriel.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.